everyone, welcome to Resilience Unraveled. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Thackeray. This podcast is a result of my fascination with health issues, resilience, performance, mental health, accountability and critical thinking, along with many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, organisations and people, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories, as well as my synthesis of the key issues, tips and strategies to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, you can also find other information at qedod.com or russellthackeray.com. Stay tuned to the end for details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So today I'm delighted to be talking to someone called Angela Andrews about a very fascinating, relevant subject that affects many, many people across the globe. And Angela, I think, is going to shed some light, illumination and wisdom around the subject area. So hi, Angela.
Hi.
There you are.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm detecting from the accent that you're across the pond.
Yes, I live in New Jersey in the United States.
Yeah. I have that idea of New Jersey being very exotic and beautiful and gorgeous and such like, but the last 2 or 3 times we talked about it is you being flooded. So
yes, it's we've gotten an unusual amount of rain lately. So normally this time of year it's very hot, it's very sunny, very dry. This year it managed to flood my tomato plants, which is unheard of, as much water as they use. So
wow.
If it keeps raining, I'll need an ark at this point. So.
Right. We see a big wooden thing going down the high street. You know what it is.
Exactly, because I've got to fit the kids and the pets, so it's got to be a big boat.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for spending time with me and my audience today. I think we're really looking forward to talking about the subject. So, Angela, tell us a bit about yourself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, well, I am a data scientist for Johnson & Johnson. I've got 5 children. All 5 are autistic, as am I and my husband.
Wow.
So, and that's the topic I think we're addressing today.
Yes, perfect. So, I mean, first of all, can we just start from the very basics? And, I mean, what is autism?
Okay, well, autism, depending who you ask, traditionally it's been called a developmental disability. However, as we get more and more research, it's being recognized more as a developmental difference in people. So it can affect people very differently.
Right.
And not just from person to person, but there's definitely also a difference between genders. Symptoms of autism classically are problems with social skills. You might not develop speech, or you develop it very late. But on the flip side, you may develop it very early and almost sound like a small professor when you're talking.
Right.
And people with autism tend to have problems with sensory. So, for example, in my case, I'm very, very sensitive to fabric and to touch. Right. So on a bad day, a shower might feel like somebody is hitting you with nails.
Wow.
So it's not just annoying, it's an extremely painful situation when a sensory problem arises.
And so you talked about this being manifests differently in the genders. So how might males and females or trans people experience this differently?
And this is actually a new area of research, because initially it was believed girls didn't get autism.
That's right.
So now, and they used to say it was very rare. Now they're finding out the difference is in one of the key areas, which is social. So in most, and I say most because everybody's unique, in most boys, they tend to be more socially aloof, not really bothering with social rules and things like that because they're not logical to them. Girls, on the other hand, tend to try to do what's called masking. So you'll see a child who's 3 or 4 years old in preschool, pre-kindergarten, and rather than playing with the other children, you'll notice that they're on the outskirts of the group and mimicking.
Right.
But if you just glanced at it, you would think, oh, she's playing with the other children. So the girls would go undetected because it's usually social. If their talking has developed normally, it's the social that makes the boys stand out, but the girls are faking it, basically.
Right. Yes.
And that made it really difficult for them to pick it out. The other thing that seems to be fairly common is the boys tend to talk late.
Right.
Or be nonverbal. And I say nonverbal because we're finding now with technology that although they're nonverbal, they're still extremely intelligent and they can still communicate. So giving them a laptop, giving them a way to communicate through a tablet, they're finding that the intelligence isn't affected, it's just the speech. So whereas boys tend to be delayed, girls tend to speak very, very early.
Right.
Great example of that, I was speaking at my first birthday, and they actually have a tape of this. I said my full name and my address when I turned 1. My daughters were the same. Right. Very, very early speakers, very large words. My youngest daughter used to say she was going to go and associate with her companions when she went outside. So that's unusual to hear from a 5-year-old.
Yes.
So there's a huge difference there. Sensory is an area where there's some slight differences, but really those are the primary areas, but it's that social piece. And now they're finding out that masking, which boys do it too as they get older and realize that that's how you get a job, that's how you make friends, unfortunately, a lot of the time, is essentially pretending to be normal.
Yes.
They're finding out it takes a horrendous toll on people's mental health. If you're autistic, you're 5 to 6 times more likely to have depression or anxiety and PTSD. And the average lifespan of someone with autism is only 55 years.
Is it really?
And that's due to suicide. It's the number 1 cause of death.
Right.
And the less obvious your struggles are, so if you're verbal, you tend to be fairly social, you have a family, you have a job, the more likely you are to commit to take your life. And
just for the point of just sweeping these things together, because I mean it's interesting. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of terminology around this area, and a lot of people talk about ASD or autism spectrum disorder and Asperger's syndrome because they're sort of, I mean, are they similar or are they on the continuum of autism? Where do they sit?
It used to be that there were several kinds of autism. So yes, you mentioned Asperger's, which was my official diagnosis when I was younger.
Right.
And there was things like PDD-NOS, which is I don't want to say milder form, but it had less symptoms.
That's extreme.
And now they've changed it. And I will say most people who are autistic are not very happy about this change.
Right.
They've called them all autism, and they're trying to describe it as being a spectrum or being like an arc of, as they put it, functioning. But to be honest, it has nothing to do with how the individuals are experiencing autism or how severe their symptoms are causing them problems. The spectrum is simply saying how much problems do people in society have with my autism.
Yes.
So, like, I'd be labeled high functioning.
Right.
Because people can talk to me, people can interact with me, they don't have to take care of me, I'm independent. But the problem with that is it completely negates any of my struggles.
I see.
However, they label people who are nonverbal or who need extra physical care as low functioning because of how it affects society, because they have to help them with things.
Yes.
And that's completely, it's negating their positive aspects. It's negating their intellect and their capabilities.
Yes.
And so
And so
It's
that's
not.
interesting. It's interesting when you talk about the high functioning things, because
Mhm.
I suppose when you talk about, and it's interesting that you're making a very clear link that this is not about intelligence, because
No.
a lot of autistic people have high levels of specific types of intelligence, don't they? In fact, that's often one of the signs, isn't that? Isn't that the case? Or sort of mathematics
Yes.
or analytical skills, and that's part of this
And that's
compulsion.
and that's actually that's a really good point to bring up. So what a lot of people don't realize is that autism and intellectual disability do not go together.
Mm,
That's actually a comorbid or a co-occurring disorder
mm,
that can happen fairly frequently in people who have significant struggles with autism already. They tend to also have problems with learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, things like that. It's a genetic link they're still figuring out,
yeah.
but it's not inherent to autism. And to your point, most people on the spectrum tend to have average to high overall intelligence, especially in what we call their specialist subjects or obsessions.
Mm,
Um, Everybody who's autistic has something
yes.
they just love, and it can be something that's with them their whole lives. An example: my son, who's 16, has been obsessed with trains since before he could speak.
Right.
My specialist subjects have stayed fairly static, but then I have what I call my mini obsessions. So, for example, right now I'm really into researching genealogy.
Right.
And partially probably because I'm adopted, so I did a DNA test, found out a little about myself, got on Ancestry and found out who my family was, and I've been tracing it.
Right.
So, but things like my love for data science and statistics and things like that have been with me my whole life. I've always been very fascinated and comforted almost by patterns and statistics.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because my understanding of this is that the diagnosis for autism is not a well, it's actually a behavioural. It's a
Mm-hmm.
behavioural indicator, so compulsion, lining things up, having things in orders, resistance for change, highly ritualistic sort of things, which is your point about the
Yes.
like a dressing ritual, or like you say, when you decide to get interested in something, boy, you get interested in it,
Yes,
and
you
that's
dive very deep into it.
yes. So is that
Sometimes
is
to the point that you forget to eat, you forget to sleep.
right. So when
It's
you were a child, obviously, for your children, it's somewhat easier because which is often the case, isn't it? It travels down the genetic line. But when you were a child, what was it like being young and having? I mean, what was it like having this thing?
honestly, and I will preface this by saying it was because of the situation I was in.
Sure.
It was actually horrendous.
Right.
I grew up in a very small area in the Midwest. Pretty narrow-minded views of disability in general, um, as well as on how girls should behave. I've always been a bit tomboyish. You were more likely to find me in a tree than playing with a doll, or I'd be in the tree with the doll because I was forced to take it with. 'Cause that's what girls do. Um, and I wasn't officially diagnosed till I was 21.
Right.
So I grew up thinking I was broken because I was bullied very badly, both by adults and children. I would do really well in school until my anxiety would kick in because people were being so unkind. So my grades kept dropping.
Right.
Um, so I was punished quite a bit. I
Right.
unfortunately did not. I had a supportive father adoptive father, I'll say, who he had some mental health issues due to his own, we'll say, demons. I did not have a supportive mom. I actually don't have contact with her anymore because of that.
Yeah.
But she just didn't want a child that wasn't normal.
And I suppose that's I know we don't use words like normal now, but it's sort. I was going to say it's sort of understandable. But it must be very. I mean, you're a parent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It must be very difficult when you see your child behaving in this sort of way,
Right.
and you do. And I wonder if the first thought is, oh my God, what's happened? Are they okay? What have I done wrong? or is there something the matter with them? Are they broken? Are they damaged? And the
Yes.
normal parental thing is to be very worried about your children. So you can imagine a situation where that would start. I mean, what happens afterwards is a different thing, but you can imagine
Right.
having an autistic child and wondering what on earth you're going to do, because the effects of the behaviour can be very extreme, can't they?
It can, well, yes, and that's where the spectrum does kind of come in, because some people experience their autism as a very painful situation, and a lot of it has to do with two primary symptoms in autism, which is the anxiety and the sensory. If you're in constant fear or constant pain, you can't learn, you
Right.
can't function, because your whole life is just surviving one breath to the next.
Right.
So they lash out because fight or flight, that is a typical symptom of all autism as well, is what they call meltdowns or shutdowns.
Yes.
And most of the time, a meltdown is a kind of a flight or freeze reaction.
Right.
I myself have them. They're not common anymore now that I'm, getting recognition for my symptoms that are troubling and getting supports.
Yeah.
But when I was masking, they were very common because masking is exhausting psychologically and physically. So, when you're exhausted, you're more likely to lose your temper, get anxious, whatever. And the same's true for someone who's autistic. So, you spend your whole day trying to pretend to be something that is completely foreign to you. You're going to be exhausted by the end of the day.
Yes.
And, like, for example, in my case, if I have a meltdown, I literally shut down.
Right.
I'll cry. I'll, cover my face or, kind of curl up, protecting almost. And it comes with this deep sense of terror, is the only way to explain it.
Right.
It's just absolute terror. And it's usually caused either by someone doing something traumatic to me. For example, the most recent one was somebody said, we were in a meeting regarding autism at work, because we're trying to start some programs for bringing in people who are autistic as well as supporting those who are already there.
Right.
And somebody made some very, we'll just say, not educated comments about autism.
Yes.
To me. And it was so painful emotionally that I went into a shutdown, and I had to end the call and, had to reach out for help because I wasn't really able to speak. That's one of the tricky parts, is you can't really ask someone what's wrong.
I see.
Because most autistics will not be able to communicate during that because the fear is just so bad.
I see.
And it's usually caused by pain. It could be emotional pain. It could be sensory. I've had meltdowns because somebody, I'll never forget this, we were at a conference and they decided to use a large, very loud bell and metal mallet to get people's attention.
Oh, wow.
And not only did that hurt very badly, I felt like someone was stabbing my eardrums.
Yeah.
They started directly behind me and I didn't know they were there.
Wow.
So I was startled too.
Yeah.
And I ended up under the table, in front of the higher ranking people at my job.
Yeah.
But they totally understood. They immediately took the bell away from her, explained what the situation was. And honestly, as soon as it stopped, I had to take a few deep breaths, wash my face, but I was fine after that.
Yes.
Because the pain ended. So that's one way that you'll see that. The other way, unfortunately, is if someone feels cornered, trapped,
Yes.
things like that, they will lash out. And when you don't understand what's going on, that's where things like, where I grew up, they believed autistics were violent.
Of course. Yes.
They're not violent, they're trying to escape.
Yes.
And if you corner them and try to grab hold of them, it's very common, unfortunately, right now, especially in schools, if a child starts to have a meltdown, they will physically restrain them, which is the worst thing you can do.
Yes.
And then they say the child's aggressive because he lashed out and you pinned him down. I say that's normal. Most people would lash out if you're trying to force them to the ground while they're already in pain.
Yes.
So there's a big need to, to hear from people who are autistic, to hear what their experiences are, so that we can modify how it's looked at, which is why I speak out.
And
Because I don't want my kids to go through what I have.
well, exactly, and it's interesting, isn't it? And when you say that, it's obvious, but of course it was only obvious because you did say that, and so it's.
Exactly.
I think people have to. I mean, that's why I'm so grateful that you're spending time with us today, because people. It's the assumption is we know everything, don't we? But we don't.
Yes.
And when we see someone behaving in a particular way, we tend to fall back on what we know. But of course,
Yes.
now if you consider autism as part of the mix, actually, the standard way of acting or the standard way of reacting to a situation is not the obvious thing, is it? And
No,
but if you don't know,
harmful.
if you don't know what you don't know, then it's a real problem.
Yeah.
So education is so important here, isn't it?
Well, and then especially here in our country, I will be blunt, I'm afraid of police officers.
Right.
Because their first reaction to someone with autism is tasing and pinning down, and getting pulled over for me causes a panic attack. Just simply getting pulled over to be told I have a headlight out.
Right.
Because I know my body language is different. I know my eye contact is different. I can kind of fake it. Like, I'll look at your forehead somewhat. And it's not just that eye contact is painful for me. It's kind of an anxiety thing, too. I always like to know exactly what's going on around me at all times.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm always looking around. Because that's why I love working from home, is because I know exactly where everything is in my room. It's enclosed. I don't have to pay attention to who's walking where and who's talking to who and who's doing what, because the only person who's going to come in my room is one of my teenagers that are still at home, because they don't understand what the words emergency means.
Yes.
I can't find the remote control. Does not constitute an emergency unless you're 16.
Well,
then it's the end of the world.
I think most 16-year-olds would say that anyway, wouldn't they?
Yes. That's hence the post-it notes all over my door currently that say "Do not disturb" or "You're grounded."
Yeah. So parenting a child with autism, what do you need to? Because you have a unique way of understanding this. Because I guess your response to them is affected by the multiplication effect of each other's autism, isn't it?
In a way, but in the same way, I feel like I have a unique insight into their reactions, and that's really helped them.
Okay.
I'm very proud of how my kids are doing. My kids are aged 15 to 23.
Right.
I have 5 of them, like I said before.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. 2 of them were nonverbal till they were a bit older.
Right.
In fact, my youngest son, who's now 16, the doctors told me that I should institutionalize him when he was 2.
Wow.
Because he's nonverbal, he's aggressive. I said, he's only aggressive with you because you don't listen to me and you pin him down and take away his security blanket.
Yeah.
Is that really necessary to do a checkup? No, it's not. Well, turns out he started talking when he was 5.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not talking 1 or 2 words, mama, dada. I'm talking sentences. Just started talking.
Yes.
Once he started talking, we realized that for at least the last year, he could also read. And I kept trying to tell them I thought he was reading, because rather than just flip pages like most kids do that can't read, you could watch his eyes following the words.
Right.
And then, when he could talk, it was proven that, oh yeah, wait, he can read. He's actually highly intelligent, but he was in so much sensory pain that it was too much, it was exhausting to talk. So once we finally were able to nail down all the different sensory issues he was having and start addressing them, out came this chatty, talkative, friendly, highly intelligent young man. He was in so much pain before that talking was just too much trouble.
And that's a really interesting way to put it, because if you look at all the research, if you look at all the science, if you look at all the what are the words? Websites. They're talking about this being a disorder or a disability, which it clearly is not. But they're not talking about those things, and that's a very practical, sensible way of thinking about it. I mean, that really breaks down the barrier for me of being able to really understand it well.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so critical to a lot of groups, like you mentioned, websites. There's a few autistic groups out there that I adore. They listen to us. There's autistic individuals that are part of the governance committee and steering committees and things like that. And that's what you need, because we don't need people to talk for us. We can talk up for ourselves.
Yes.
But there are other groups. There's a very large one that I won't name because I don't want to get in trouble.
No, best not to.
There's a very large one that everybody seems to run to for guidance on autism. And their number one goal is to eradicate us. We're a disease to them, a disorder. And we need to find out the genetics so that we can prevent autism. I don't want to be prevented. My children should not be prevented. There's other people out there who are brilliant, and people don't understand it's because of their autism, not despite it. They look at the world differently because their brain is wired differently. Tim Burton's a great example.
Yeah, I was going to say there are some noted people with autism.
Yes, Dan Aykroyd is another one. Steve Jobs. If you like iPhones, thank autism.
Yeah.
You know,
and even Sheldon from The Big Bang, he is, I know it's entertainment, but it's a way of thinking about autism in a very pleasant way, isn't it?
It is to a point, but some of it is, he is... well,
he's an actor. So
definitely hamming up the social.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But some of it's very true. So he takes things very literally. I do that. Most people with autism do that.
Yeah.
It can be quite amusing for people who are aware that I'm autistic. For example, I had someone on a phone call recently say, "Oh, we'll ring a bell when we're done." My immediate response is, "There's not really going to be a bell, is there?" Because that's like one of the sounds that really hurts me. So I immediately am in panic mode.
Yes.
And he just started chuckling, and he said, "Thank you for demonstrating what I was talking about earlier with autistics taking things literally."
Yes.
Just things like that. My daughter was so funny as a child. We could not watch any Christmas cartoons like Rudolph, things like that. She would fly into a rage, screaming and crying because it's not logical, because they can't do those things. She couldn't understand that it was pretend. I had to teach my children how to pretend. It doesn't come naturally because it's not logical.
Yes.
Pretending is fanciful.
Isn't it?
But that doesn't mean they're not. It doesn't mean they're not creative. They're highly creative. It's just in a very factual, almost way.
And it's peculiar, isn't it? I'm just thinking back. Sorry, going back to the entertainment line, and you look at many of the characters in American television stories. There's a lot of autistic characters, aren't there, who are, Lord and Bones, and I'm just thinking...
yes. Oh, The Good Doctor.
Yeah, Elementary.
So I will say in The Good Doctor, the problem with that is they're portraying him as having no empathy, which is actually not true of autism.
No, that's interesting, because a lot of people say that autism is a lack of autism or not being able to read social signs from other people. What's your view on that?
There's a difference there, though. I can't read social cues. I'm very upfront with people when I talk to them now, face to face, or even on the phone. If I can't pick up voice tones, I can't pick up body language. I'm definitely not picking up facial expressions because it's too close to your eyes. So I'm not looking.
Yeah.
So just be honest, be upfront, and be blunt with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Yes.
What hurts me is finding out later that you were trying to express something to me and didn't bother to be honest with me.
Yes.
But as far as empathy goes...
You mean treat you like an adult, Angela?
Yes, exactly. Just be honest with me.
Yeah.
So I love living in New Jersey. I think people here are so friendly, and everybody's like, that's not what people usually say. I'm like, you don't play games with me. You tell me like it is. You tell me how you think or feel about something, and we move on.
Yes.
I don't have to figure you out. And it's so refreshing. That's actually why I have a lot of friends who are British as well, because I feel people in Britain are the same way. They're very direct and honest. And it just makes my life so much easier, and I love that.
Yes.
I also might be a little obsessed with British comedies. So.
Oh, really?
Yes. It started with Keeping Up Appearances, and it's just been a downhill spiral.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. That is a blast from the past. The hyacinth bouquet. Yes,
and it made me laugh so hard. She's so funny. And then the IT Crowd is one of my favorites.
Yes.
Moss and Roy are definitely on the spectrum somewhere.
Oh, well, Moss is definitely on the spectrum, isn't there? No doubt. No, I don't think we even need to pretend about that one.
No, but Roy is too. He's one of the types that's more awkward than he is odd.
And it
But
is, and it is odd, isn't it? Well, it's not odd. It's actually quite understandable that a lot of people with
yeah,
autism end up in jobs that involve a lot of maths or
yeah,
IT or
or
actuarial work,
music or
extreme
art.
logic.
Music and art too,
Yes,
because it's all patterns, it's all predictable.
that's right.
And actually, art, a lot of it comes from things like it's very common in autism to have what's called synesthesia.
Yes, that's right.
So, for example, I see colors when I hear music,
Yes,
which is awesome. Unless it's a really bad noise, because then I'm blinded and my ears hurt.
yes.
Um, so, it's also common. I was speaking to someone yesterday that I work with that's autistic, and she associates numbers with colors.
Right.
You can smell color, you can taste sound. Because our brains are rewired differently,
Yes.
some of the wiring gets a little crossed. So we get some unique traits like that. But think about someone who can listen to music and paint what they see.
Yeah.
Well, I honestly, and this is just a hypothesis, I will put that out there. I wonder if Beethoven was autistic and had synesthesia to do with rhythm, and that's why he could write the music he could.
Well, funnily enough, because my background is a musician many, many years ago, and there were and synesthesia was a regular thing talked about in composers. And
Really?
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some research indicating that Mozart might have been autistic.
Yes. And they've done that. A lot of psychologists have come together in order to try to show that, first of all, autism is not a recent thing.
Yes, exactly.
So the whole vaccine thing, I won't get into it, but if you want to annoy me, tell me that's why I'm autistic and see what happens. Um, I've done my studies. I will lecture you for 3 hours straight until you give in. Um, but autism has been around forever.
Yes.
It's a neurodiverse condition. So they've looked at Einstein, who, the man walked out of a violin duet with the Queen of England. Come on.
Yeah.
Tell me that's not a social skills issue.
Yes.
Even I know better.
Well,
I don't care if she's playing too loud. You just deal with it.
And it's interesting because all of these things are, we're all the same. No, it's hard to know what to say about this. But I was going to say I don't understand why autism's so not understandable because the behaviours are difficult to suppose. But actually, they're just extreme versions of things.
They don't want to listen. That's
right.
What I think it is. They have their own ideas. So things like ABA therapy. That's one thing I never put my children through. ABA therapy's purpose is to make your child not autistic.
I see.
If a child starts stimming, which for those who don't know what that is, the most classic version is, think hand flapping. It's a pretty significant stim. All autistics stim in some way. Mm-hmm. I got a funny one. My husband's stim. He grew up in a household where two of the members of the household were completely deaf. So signing was a big thing. Signing was his first language. Oh. His stim is while he's talking to people, he signs the conversation down next to his leg. It's really creative. I was like, that's the best stim I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, wow.
It could be tapping, hand flapping, hair tugging. There's all sorts of them. And ABA therapy and doctors label those as unnecessary or problematic behaviors. Those are critical behaviors to help us self-regulate.
Yes.
You take away someone's stims, just see how long it takes before they have a complete meltdown.
Yes,
they need that to regulate themselves.
Yes. It's expression, isn't it?
It is. It's a way of taking, I would describe it, first of all, I've been stimming the whole time we're on the phone. I haven't stopped pacing. That's normal for me. Mm-hmm. It helps me think. It takes all this electric energy that I feel throughout my body all day, and it gets it out so that my brain can function and focus. You take that away from a child, is it any wonder they're struggling in school? They're not allowed to even tap their pencil in the air?
Yes.
Makes sense. Let the child do what they need to do as long as they're doing their work. Yes. Is my thought.
Yeah.
So,
and recognize the difference.
Well, and there it is, right there.
Yeah.
We don't recognize the difference. Yeah. To most people, autism is an epidemic, it's a disease, and it needs to be cured.
Yes.
The only reason autism is so harmful to most people with it is people who aren't autistic treating us badly.
Yes.
when my needs are met, when my, we'll say, struggles are dealt with, which I'm so blessed to work for the company I do, because they're really, really great about it.
Mm.
When my needs like that are met, the things that I can do with the talents that come with autism are amazing. Same with my children, same with other people. And the number one thing I always tell parents, because I've started a support group at work, the number one thing I tell them, first of all, I know the doctor told you, I'm sorry, it's autism. Let me change that.
Mm.
Congratulations. You have a neurodiverse child.
Yes.
He's going to surprise you. She's going to amaze you with what they can do.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's very common that the only thing that ever gets focused on is what can't they do? What are they doing that's not normal? What are they not doing that's normal? Why not focus on the positives?
Mm.
Okay, yes, your daughter spends hours on end spinning the wheels in a car around and around and around. But then when she gets up and starts talking, you realize that she's essentially just figured out some amazing technique for something.
Yeah.
Or composed some music or a piece of artwork in her brain while she's sitting there.
No,
This
that's
is
really,
not wasted time, this is
no.
thinking.
And so actually this ability to create outlets for people with autism is the key, isn't it? Because if stimming is an outlet, if music is an outlet, I'm guessing some of the physical things might be more challenging. But, you know, the artistic, creative things, education doesn't seem to lend itself to that so much. I know in the UK we have to follow this quite rigid national curriculum, but...
Same here.
Yeah.
And it leaves out, actually not just autistics, anyone who's neurodiverse is left out.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's not fair. And they know that autism, I will say autism right now, they're saying it's 1 in 55 people worldwide is diagnosed with autism. In New Jersey, it's 1 in 36.
Really?
There's a reason for that, though. In the United States, New Jersey is known as the best place to raise a child on the spectrum.
I see.
I'm not from New Jersey. I moved here 3 years ago when my youngest two were in high school. I deliberately got a job out here as soon as I could.
Yes.
As soon as one hired me, they didn't pay to move us. We moved ourselves so our kids would get what they need, and it's been an amazing transformation because the children I saw at home, I'm seeing at school. My son is in marching band, and the first week of band camp his freshman year, parents are coming up to me going, how does he already have the music and all the steps memorized? And I just smiled. And I said, it's patterns.
Yes.
I was the same way in marching band. You know, my daughter, actually, both my kids spoke at Johnson & Johnson during World Autism Day about being autistic. I never thought I'd see them do that publicly. But being in an environment where they feel not only that it's okay to be different, but that it's a benefit to be different.
Yes.
It's reinforcing what I've been telling them all along. Because you know kids don't listen to their parents.
And how smart how smart is it of Johnson & Johnson and the employees? Because they're getting very intelligent, you know, very loyal, very very good workers, you know, excellent employees who can you know, it's like everybody. If you create a condition where people can thrive, you get the best from them.
And they're working on doing even more. Johnson & Johnson is hoping to become one of the most autism-friendly companies by 2025.
Wow.
And it benefits them and us because I will tell you, out of the 76% of autistic individuals who are at, we'll say, my level-ish of functioning, so they have advanced degrees, they can hold a job, they, you know, can live on their own, 12% will ever be employed full-time in their career area.
Yes.
Out of 76%, only 12% of them.
Such a waste, isn't it?
And the reason is because they can't get past the interviews. It has nothing to do with their abilities. It has to do with being judged by neurotypical social norms.
Yes.
If you don't know the word neurotypical, it's people that aren't neurodiverse, that don't have autism or ADHD or any difference in their brain.
Yeah.
And eye contact.
Now, Angela,
I can't tell you the number of jobs I didn't get because they thought I was being dishonest.
Yes. Yes, because of eye contact. Now, Angela, when we first started talking, I said to you I was going to be very respectful of your time, and I just looked at the time and I realised I've gone way over the time that I promised. So the first thing is apologies, but you've been so fascinating. The second thing is that where would you recommend people go for a source of help? Because I know you have something. I know you have a resource on YouTube, a video of you. Yes. Is there anywhere else that you would recommend?
Um, well, and it really depends what they're looking for. What I would recommend first is when you're searching YouTube or anywhere else for advice, stay away from any site that mentions curing, fixing, or normalizing a child
Right.
because it's harmful. It
That's
is
good
very,
tip.
very harmful. If someone really is kind of lost looking for advice or help, I have people contact me on YouTube all the time and I'll send them links. I'm more than happy to help people. So, that's another route too, because it can be so tricky to navigate the internet
And the
and
other,
figure out what's true, what's not.
that's right. And the other thing, of course, is that this is a big announcement, isn't it, Angela, of your new book?
Yes, I've started. I finally started writing a book. So
I really do think you should. And you and
and
I,
now I'm held to it because you've announced it publicly.
you and I can talk about that offline here. But look,
Absolutely.
you've been amazing. I've been absolutely fascinated. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I can only thank you so much for your time. It's been a real interesting window into the subject, and I'm hoping at some stage I can actually ask you to come back and maybe delve into a couple of the other areas in a bit more depth.
Absolutely. Anytime. I'm more than happy to. This has been fun.
You've been such a great guest. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You take care.
You too.
Thanks for listening today. You can go to our site, qedod.com/podcasts, subscribe and see other titles in this series. You can also contact us at info@qedod.com by sending us an email to talk about tough love leadership, accountability, resilience, or avoiding burnout. And if you want a copy of our free ebook, which talks about the fundamentals of resilience, just go to the site and go to qedod.com/free ebook and download it there. Take care.